Welcome, Sandy. Thank you for
Thank
joining
you.
us today.
Thanks for having me.
Um, for those of you that are tuning in on our vodcast on YouTube, some of you, maybe of our younger viewers, might recognize this lovely lady sitting behind me. Today we have Sandy, who was Amory's mum on Heartbreak High. You legend, you. Something that not many people know, in fact, I've known Sandy for quite a while now, and I had no idea about this until recently. Sandy used to be a tour guide in Sydney, Australia. Do you want to get started by telling us a little bit about your background and what sort of led you into something that cool?
Yeah, totally. So I was a tour guide for Lantern Ghost Tours, which is a ghost tour company that takes you on a 90-minute tour around the rocks. And I got into it shortly after I moved to Sydney, actually. So I've been into the whole ghosts, monsters, all of this stuff since I was a kid. I just love the stuff. I can't get enough of it. And, just being an actor who's just moved to Sydney, I needed a gig of some kind. And they were hiring. So I auditioned by making up a ghost story and sent it in, and they liked it. And I got picked. And it was awesome. I did it for about 2-ish years. Yeah. Year and a half, 2 years. Yeah. It was definitely an awesome gig.
Yeah. It's, I think that's always been right at the top of my list of potential careers as I was growing up, I've always, like you've just been obsessed with that kind of stuff, like forever.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So kudos to you for
Thank you.
knocking that one off the bucket list. That's really cool.
Yeah, definitely a bucket list item. Like, I think if you got a proper living wage out of it, kind of thing, as opposed to like the pocket money stuff.
Work,
there's no reason why you wouldn't want to keep doing it forever. It's just
100%.
so awesome. Yeah.
So when the types of people that would come on the tours, were they all like all in, or were there some sort of hesitant people that were like a bit, skeptical or paranoid,
Absolutely, 100%. So you could tell who had been sort of like roped into coming in, who was happy to be there. So oftentimes it was the husbands would be the ones who were skeptics, and you could tell they were doing it because their missus had said, I really want to do the ghost tour. And so these poor guys would just be like, all right. And I'd tell them these stories, and they'd have like these wry smiles like, yeah. But, it was funny. We'd have dowsing rods on the tours that we would use. So you could start playing with those. And the trick to those is you hold them very lightly in your hand so they can move. And I can tell you every single time we get the dowsing rods to move, like show us yes, show us no. Could you point to where there's a ghost? And every single time we'd get someone to hold those dowsing rods and say, could you point to where there was a ghost? You'd see the rods just go like that.
To you?
Oh, to whoever was holding it. It was the best. I'd just be like, so great. But you know what? I used to love it when the kids were on the tour because they were so fearless, and they're so curious, and they were like absolutely enraptured, and they were so bold. Like, you'd say, this is where, people have claimed to have felt something, seen something, things appear. Does anyone want to stand in this spot? The kids would be the first up, just racing up, and they'd like egg each other on. And it was just so cool. They'd have like a billion questions. It was just the best time. The kids were so cool.
Did anything happen to them while they're like on any of the tour?
Not the kids. It'd be, some people would claim that, they'd get a couple of heebie-jeebies here and there, that sort of stuff. And we used to have people contacting us after the ghost tours to tell us. They'd be like, is it possible that something could have followed me home? And you're like, oh, yeah, that happens all the time. Oh. Yeah, we call those attachments. So we used to have to warn people, like, towards the end of the tour, it's like, look, if you do get an attachment, try to cleanse the space. Some people use sage. Some people, if it's ethically sourced, some people use rosemary. There's like a whole bunch of cool herbs you can use to do that. But most of the time, if you tell them to leave, they will. But yeah, we used to get that all the time. I used to have this joke on the tour me and one or two of the other tour guides, that there was always one ghost that didn't like you and one ghost that loved you. And there was one guy, we used to nickname him Frank actually, but it was very common for him, for any new tour guide, he'd generally follow them home because he was just curious.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and we had one tour guide, she didn't stick around very long after that. She was like, I swear to God, it was a 45-minute trip on the car ride home, and she could feel something like right there, and she was like, she's constant, she's like, what is that? What is that? And yeah, one of my friends in the tour company said, probably Frank, he's probably just followed you home. Just tell him to leave if you don't like it. And she was just like, they follow you home?
That's so good.
Yeah.
I know, something that I have been doing for a couple of years now is I'm with a group that does paranormal investigations as well.
Yes.
Yeah. And there's this one place in particular that we visit quite regularly that we really have to put our guard up because
hell yes.
Yeah, it's not a very nice spirit at all.
Ooh.
I've been personally attacked by this one, and
Get out.
we're just like, you are not following us home. Like, yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I've actually got one of those stories. I was going to save it for later on in the podcast, but yeah, there's one. She's actually the reason I had to leave the ghost tour company.
Oh no. Give it to us.
Yeah, you want to hear it? All right. So,
yeah,
and Lan to know about this because I actually sat down. I wrote them a handwritten letter in fountain pen to tell them all about it because I thought they'd love it and they could use it on the tour.
No way.
But yeah, so I'd been with the company for about a year and a half, I think, around this point. It was towards the end of it, and we'd just acquired one of the newer tour guides that actually got this for us, a new site on the ghost tour. So it's this beautiful 90-minute sort of walk all around the place, and you get some gorgeous sights of Sydney. So if nothing else, you'll get, beautiful shots. And we've got some great spots, but this one was an absolute game changer because it's part of the living museums in Sydney, which means that if you want to get into it, you need a key. And we needed special after hours access. And when you open the door to get into the place, you go down and it's all dark and it's just amazing. Now the place, sadly, is the final place for this one spirit. Her body was found in a well, and that's where we have to go to get to it. Now they say, and I've been trying to look up the records, try and corroborate all of the information, and it's hard to do it because this happened in the 1800s.
Right.
And 1800s in Australia, there isn't a lot of records. Even if you try to go back to the State Library, that sort of stuff, it's just very limited. So I have no idea how my friend at the ghost tour company found this, but he managed to get all this information. They say her name may have been Anne Walker. Now, I never tell the story at home because the second I do, I get the heebie-jeebies and it's like it's a warning, and I'll tell you why in a minute. So we got to this new site, open the door, we go inside, and it's this beautiful place. It's part of the archaeological project in Sydney called the Big Dig. And it's absolutely gorgeous, and then you see the well, and you're going to love what her nickname is. I'm going to save that for last. But you get there, and they say that her body was found right at the bottom of this well, right? Now, because I was quite nervous at this point, what I used to do with the ghost tours, because I'm an actor, is I used to put on a character because I'm not great with public speaking. So, I should have like a voice and we tell these scary stories and it'd be fun. But towards the end, thanks to one complaint, we weren't allowed to do that anymore. So I had to try and speak to people, and not great with public speaking. So I was super nervous and I was making a lot of jokes. And I think this one pissed her right off.
Ooh.
Yeah, and this is like, rookie stuff. It's 101. You don't make jokes, right? But I did. I made a joke about, I can't even remember the full thing, but it was a parallel between, Johnny Walker, the whiskey brand.
Yep.
I can't remember exactly what I said, but I just said it because I was nervous, right? And it worked, it broke a bit of the tension. We got people with the dowsing rods playing with it. And I did the polite thing where I sort of thanked the spirit, I was like, thanks for letting us visit, that sort of stuff. And we sort of left. That night, got home, I could friggin' tell because there was just sort of this sense of something doesn't feel quite right.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. That night, I had the worst nightmares I have ever had in my life.
No.
Oh, yeah. And
I've got goosebumps.
oh, yeah. Oh, it got bad, man. I've only had nightmares like that once in my life. And for her, like, I saw all kinds of shit. Like, she was really screwing with me. There was at one point, do you want me to tell you? There was this one point.
Yeah.
I saw a woman, trigger warning, by the way, for possible suicide. I apologize. I saw a woman. She was dressed in black. She had a noose around her neck and she was being hanged. And I could see the look on her face. It was horrifying. And I woke up in the worst kind of terror. Like, we've had nightmares before, that sort of stuff. But this was terror, pure terror. And I was just like, okay, I've pissed her off. I knew the second I'd done it. So I did everything you're supposed to do. Cleanse the space, asked her, please leave me alone. I apologize if I offended you, did all of that. So next night, went in to do the ghost tours. You need a key to open thing. It wouldn't open, no matter how many times I tried to turn it. And I was like, okay.
Oh.
So I actually sat there quietly and I was like, hey, listen, I'm really sorry. I'm sorry that I offended you. We need to do this site on the ghost tours. It's really important. It's the best site, but most importantly, like, it's kind of worth my job. It's, kind of integral to the tour. I said, could you please let us in? And I apologize if I've offended you. The key turns, the door opens, and I'm like, okay, we're good. Go down there, do the tour, explain everything that's happened, did everything again, close up, got home, and there's just this sense of dread, pure dread. I've never felt anything like it, where I was just like, something is really fucking wrong. And this had followed me home. And when I was at home, I was just like, nah, I could just feel there was something wrong in the air. That night, nightmares all night. And I was like, what the hell is it?
So
and
do these nightmares like all have the same kind of theme, or?
Yeah, it was all just watching this woman.
Yeah.
And she was in every single one of those nightmares. That's how I knew it was her.
So what did she look like?
So she had dark hair. She had this look on her face. I'll never forget it. It was horror. It was just this horror. It was like watching someone being murdered kind of thing. It was just, and it was the scariest thing I'd ever seen. And I could just keep seeing her face. And the one I remember, the standout, was that dream of being hanged. And I was just like, I know it's fucking her. I know it's her. And this is where, having grown up with all of this stuff and being really into this stuff actually pays off, because it took me a moment, but I realized why she kept coming back. And it was because she wasn't attached to me. It wasn't a spirit attachment to me. She was attached to an object. And the object she was attached to was the key that opens the thing. And I realized that if I give up the key, I have to give up the ghost tour, because you can't do the tour without that specific site. So I was like, all right, that's what you need. That's what I'll do. So I did. I wrote the letter, quit the ghost tour company, took the key, wrapped it up in the letter and posted it. From that second on, she was gone. Yeah, after I cleansed the space and everything. But there is this one thing. Every time I talk about her in my home, I can start feeling that dread creeping back up on me. And I'm just like, it's a warning where she's like, don't, because I will find you, kind of thing. It's like it calls her back.
Are you okay now? You're not feeling anything now?
Yeah, it's usually when it's in my home.
Okay.
But get this, guess what her name was? And I'll tell you why. So when they dredged this poor woman up out of the well, what she was wearing, they couldn't tell the actual color of it because she'd been down there that long.
Right.
And it just looked black. So her name is the Woman in Black.
Ooh. I like it.
No joke, yeah. And every time I say that name in my home, I can start feeling it creeping up. And I'm like, okay, we're not going to talk about it.
I think having a level of respect for her is a good thing. Like, rather than, okay, I understand that she may have been pissed off, right? But you've made amends. You've You speak very respectfully of her, and you can, you obviously know she's a force to be reckoned with. I think so long as you're not tarnishing her name in any way, I think, you're safe.
Yeah.
But
you think so, yeah. But I'm like, okay, she doesn't want to talk about it, we're not going to go there.
Yeah,
she doesn't want to bring it up. Yeah. But yeah, that was my big one. Yeah.
It's incredible how powerful they are, isn't it?
Yeah. And I've never had one quite that intense in my life. Yeah.
That's,
I was like, oh.
Yeah. And so how long did it take you afterwards to, I mean, I guess that would have traumatized you a fair bit, right? Like,
you would have thought, but I was just relieved at that stage. I think probably because I've survived worse situations. So yeah,
from the living.
Oh yeah. I was like, oh, ghosts and nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And because I was like, okay, no, that was my fault that I started that. I was kind of like, okay, we're good. And when it kind of stopped, I was like, okay, decompress. But I slept with the lights on for ages.
Yeah, I bet you did.
God, yeah.
So something that I really want to get from this podcast is if any of our viewers have experienced something similar or might be going through something similar right now, what would you advise to help them?
First things first, cleanse the space. So what I did was I would ask the spirit, hey, I appreciate you trying to visit me, but kind of not cool with this. Please leave.
Set your boundaries.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're the magic words. Please leave. And I would cleanse the space. So if you can't find ethically sourced sage, that one's kind of important. There's a whole bunch of other herbs that are said to be quite protective. Rosemary is great. There's St. John's wort I used to use back in the day. It was really good. But my favorite is actually dragon's blood resin. So it sounds like a very scary name, but it's not. It's just a type of tree resin. And it's like incense. So you can burn that on charcoal and it's excellent for cleansing a space. There's also frankincense and myrrh. So some people use that. I use it with essential oils as well sometimes. But if not, just get the incense. Is great for that sort of stuff. Some people use a little bit of lavender, but I would definitely use a whole bunch of protective herbs. And that generally does the trick because most spirits, at least 9 out of 10, 99% that I've come across have just been curious. But if they're still coming at you, then I would say my personal thing was I would say, look, I apologize if I've offended you and tried that. I would start calling in some experts. So usually paranormal investigators are great at this stuff. Some people will go to their own spiritual paths to do it, to cleanse the space. But for me, because I love studying lore and folklore and things like that. And I love learning from different sort of what different monsters are in different cultures and how people, got through them. Like silver is really protective, apparently. There's certain symbols that are really protective. I'm actually wearing one right now. It's my pentacle, but
I've got one on too.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's because I'm pagan, so I generally wear that for protection. Some people use certain crystals, but for me, because I knew about different types of lore, I knew that ghosts have a tendency to attach themselves to things sometimes. So, for instance, if you buy something at flea markets or things like that, the first thing you do is cleanse it. If you get haunted by it, sometimes you have to just let it go. So, that would be my advice. But, definitely seek out the professionals if it gets bad. But usually, 99.9 times, just ask them to leave, and they're really good about that.
And if you're in need of a professional to come and give you a hand, in my link tree, send me a message. I'll hook you up. We've got a big team of investigators that are really good at this kind of thing.
Awesome.
Let me know. Wow, that's... Wow.
It is a bit, isn't it?
Yeah,
absolutely. And I've never had that experience anywhere else. And like I've done like an investigation or two. I've got like an EMF meter at home and all of that good stuff. yeah, generally most spirits that I've come across have just been just curious.
Mhm.
They just linger because
Yeah.
that's just their jam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know previously you mentioned that you've done a few investigations at other places, like not with work.
Yeah.
Did you have any experiences there? Like not of
God,
that magnitude, I suppose,
No.
but
I did. My favorite was at Q Station, so Quarantine Station.
Yeah,
It's a very it's a very famous sort of ghost tour there. And I went as a friend of mine knew one of the tour guides, so yeah, we got a great hookup. And I brought my stuff. I brought my EMF because I was like, hell yeah, I want to like properly do an investigation kind of stuff. And my EMF isn't the K2, it's the Rook, so it kind of pulls away a lot of cell phone interference, that kind of stuff. And it's said to like mitigate a little bit of the copper wiring, but I don't know how accurate that is because I used to use it near my bed all the time. It used to go off and I was like, no, it's copper wiring, it's copper wiring, it's copper wiring, it's got to be copper wiring. Yeah, but I took that with me and, you know, at the beginning of the tour, I distinctly remember this. So my friend had the dowsing rods. She brought it with her. And she goes, oh, yeah, no, the spirits want to talk to you. And I was just like, right now? Because I was just like trying to listen to what like they were telling us. And I had my EMF and I was like raring to go. And I was like, oh, I don't want to be holding dowsing rods right now. And so I held the dowsing rods. I was like, fine, give them to me. And I put them in my hand and I just held them there. And I could feel this hand at the small of my back. And it was just trying to gently nudge me. A split second later, I turned around because there was a car that had missed its exit and it had turned into our street and it managed to stop just before it got to us. But it was just like a few, maybe about a foot away from me. And I was just like, get out. So it felt like someone was gently trying to nudge me out of the way. And I was like, no freaking way. And I was like, spirits want to talk to you. All right, let's talk. Yeah, it was insane.
That's so lucky.
Yeah, and I distinctly remember it. It didn't feel scary in any way. It felt really calming, that hand on my back. I just felt very reassured and comforted. And it makes sense because it was a place where there was a lot of nurses as well. Everyone always focuses on patients and they're kind of like, oh, you know, the conditions would have been appalling and people would have suffered. But people forget that there were actually there must have been very kind people there as well. A lot of nurses, a lot of empathetic people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then later on in the tour, we were outside the morgue and they were talking about a spirit of a little girl who sometimes haunts the area. So, of course, I took my EMF out to play with it. And I was like, oh, come on, there's got to be something around a morgue. And you know where it went off? Right next to me. It didn't go off at the top. It only went off, in a small shape right here. And if I moved it to this side, it just went blank. If I moved it to the top, went blank. If I started playing with it and just made a little shape like that, it went off insane. And I was just like, hey, how you doing, girl? Yeah.
Remind me, in their morgue, is there the one that's got the silver doors like into the in the wall?
Yeah, that's the one.
Okay.
Yeah, and they used to wheel people in,
Right. I got into one of them when I was there. I couldn't remember if it was that location or another one that I'd done.
Yeah.
They were like, oh, does anyone want to climb in? And stupid me,
that's brilliant.
And they took a lot of photos while the door was closed. It was only closed for like 3 seconds tops.
Yeah, right.
And apparently they got lots of orb activity around the door. And I had another experience there too. You know the Gravedigger's Hut?
Yes.
That room's insane.
Yeah.
So I've done a mediumship course and I'm quite sensitive to energies and all that.
Yeah.
And the second I walked over the threshold into the Gravedigger's Hut, I got mad dizzy spell. Like the room was just spinning, like it was insane. I felt really heavy, like I needed to sit down, like it was pushing me down.
Yeah.
And then like all I remember was I just want to get out of here, but the other half of me is going, but I've got to see what else there is. So I couldn't flee. And then we've gone into the bedroom and there's a couple of cupboards in there. And the tour guide was like, oh, I forget the guy's name, but if you ask him nicely, he might open and close the doors to the cupboard, and that happens quite a bit. And I was convinced that this was rigged because it happened that much. Like, you'd ask them to open the doors would just this creaky old door open and then bang, back again. And I was like, it was on cue every time someone would ask. And so I'm looking around, I'm pulling things out, I'm like full investigator mode trying to debunk this. Could not. And I even thought like a wooden floor, it might just be people's like weight moving on the floor, but no. Just could not work this one out. It was so impressive that this spirit was so intelligent and responsive and just, it was a really amazing experience at that place. If you haven't been to Q Station, highly recommend. Really, really worth the visit. And they've got accommodation there too if you're coming from out of town. So the accommodation is really nice, very nicely done.
Yeah, they let you stay overnight. Yeah. And I was just like, I may not do that tonight.
But they seem like, when we were there anyway, the spirits don't seem to go anywhere near the accommodation though. They're very respectful of your space. And isn't
that insane? Where you're just like going, wow, like ghosts are more respectful than people are half the time. You're just like, all right, cool.
Yeah.
Boundaries are good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting place.
Yeah. It's definitely funny. Like, I had like mostly positive experiences there. There was only one place where I refused to go, and it was a house where they say a girl was murdered there, and in the worst circumstances. Like, she was drugged and then they reckon assaulted and murdered. And I just, like, for something like that, I was like, oh, that poor woman. And they reckon that if you went to the back of the house, there was a bathtub and that's where she was murdered. And I just absolutely refused because it just felt like, for me, I was like, nah, man, she's been through enough. Like, I just don't want to be.
Parade that.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, oh, all I could feel was just that poor woman. No, she deserved a lot better than that, you know. So that was the only place where I refused to go. But they reckon that a lot of people would feel things in that house, like they'd feel like a hand on their shoulder and that sort of stuff. And I was like, no, I'm gonna chill out here. And it was more just like I didn't mind like feeling stuff like hands on the shoulders or anything, but it's just because it felt like I was, I don't know, trespassing on, and it just felt a little not great, not respectful for me to do it. But that was pretty much it. But I know that the tour guide I went to Q Station with, she didn't have the greatest time. She reckons that like I was just super curious, and because I was treating it like a paranormal investigation, I was just like constantly looking for explanations. I was like, could have been anything. It's dark. Oh God, it could have been shadows. It could be anything. Hand on the back. I was like, oh, that could have been, oh, there's no one standing next to me. So I was like, that one's a little bit harder. Like, it could just be, you know, a phantom, you know, like people have phantom pains all the time. It could just be that. But I was like, or it might not be, especially if it goes with other like feelings. But for her, she reckons there was one point we were all standing in a circle and they turned the lights out, and the only lights in the room, it just went sort of red. And that was the only light. They're really loud in the room. And she reckoned at one point she turned to me and she said something. And she goes, it was so weird because I know it was supposed to be you because you were standing next to me, but it wasn't you because it didn't look like you. Like, it just looked like it was much taller and looked like it was wearing a hat. It looked like a guy. And I was like, are you serious? She goes, yeah, it was like the silhouette of a man is what it looked like to me. And it turned to me and I asked you, would you hold my hand? And it held my hand, but she goes, did you actually hear me say that? I was like, mate, no, this is the first time I'm actually hearing you tell me that. She goes, yeah, she goes, okay, from now on, I really need you to hold my hand wherever we go into places and they're going to turn the lights off. And I was like, yeah, 100%. Because you're like, yeah, that was just super freaky because that should have been you. And she goes, And like she was standing right next to me, so I would have heard her.
Yeah.
But yeah. And it just made me think of that, the episode of Haunting of Hill House. Yeah, it just made me think about, oh shit, I didn't even consider that could be a possibility that, one of them could just materialize right next to you without you realizing.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah, so she was having a bit of a rough time of it, poor thing. But yeah. And I'm sitting there just like, damn it, I wanted to see that.
Yeah, spill there wasn't a
Isn't it?
camera to watch it back. Hey?
Yeah, exactly. I'd love to like invest in an EVP to see if you can hear anything back. Yeah.
It's
Cool.
amazing how much you don't hear with your ears that you pick up on those devices.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you have to like go back and listen to specific things. You're like, what is that? Is that an echo? What is that? Yeah.
We've in this podcast we'll be sharing some of our EVPs that we've gotten on investigation.
Wicked.
And some of they blow my mind.
Yeah.
I reckon the EVP is probably my favorite piece of evidence. Like, okay, video is really cool, like seeing it with your own eyes, but when you're in the moment and you're asking questions and psychically you hear the answers, but no one else around you can. When it comes through on the EVP, it's just the coolest thing ever.
Exactly. Like, especially when you've got those feelings and you've got those heebie-jeebies. Like, I would have loved to have had an EVP at that moment when my friend said that she saw that silhouette of the man, and I'm just like, holy shit. Because, she was feeling really freaked out, and I was like, I am so sorry, buddy. Yeah, it's hilarious because, you go on one of these things and there's a sensitive part of you or an intuitive part of you that's like, nope, don't want anything to do with it. There's the ghost tour part of you that's like, nah, run towards the scary thing.
Yeah, right.
And then this paranormal investigator part of you that's like, no, I want to investigate the weird thing.
Yeah.
And you're just like, our instinct is to run from danger because, it's self-preservation. But when you're an investigator or a tour guide or anything, it's the exact, exactly. Or it's just like, they kind of teach you like, oh no, you want to go towards the weird thing. You want to find the creepy thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you kind of do. There's a part of you that's like, I want to see it. I want to see if it's possible.
Yeah, you just want to poke that beast.
Yeah, it's like poking a bruise. Yeah. You're just like, what is that?
So do you think that certain people are more susceptible to having spirits interact with them?
1,000,000,000%. Yeah.
What do you think makes, like, what are the key characteristics that make up an ideal conduit for a spirit to interact with?
You know what? I reckon it's a degree of openness. So I reckon most people, I'd say a lot of people would have pretty good intuition. A lot of us, we get that sort of gut feeling, lots of hairy feelings. And especially people who have to work in areas where there's a lot of danger. You read about so many documented cases where they'll teach you, trust your gut instinct. It's trying to tell you something. You read so many stories where there's been cops in situations who are like, we've always been taught to trust that gut instinct because it's there for a reason. And I remember being a little kid and being taught, even like about stranger danger, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
They were like, always trust your gut. And so I grew up with that.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it is some people, you can call it anything. I think some people shy away from the word psychic or they shy away from the word, sensitive, that sort of stuff. But it's true, some people genuinely are quite sensitive to it. I do feel like it's one of those things where sometimes when you kind of like interact with the darkness, it can interact back with you. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, it's like when you sort of take a peek behind the veil, it's sort of like there's something that's sort of taking a peek at you too.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think most people have to realize, especially when it comes to things like spirits or ghosts, most of the time, like these guys were alive at one point. They were us. They're just people. So if you look at it as, they're just people. They're in a different place now. They're just in a different plane. It kind of takes a lot of the fear out of it because, you don't look at it as the big scary ghost. You look at it as the dearly departed. You look at it as, these are people who were loved at one point, who loved other people at one point, and there's an empathy that goes with that. So I think when certain people, when they tap into that empathy, there are certain people that are absolutely 100% sensitive to that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I know in my family there were people who didn't want to be, who came face to face with ghosts even though they didn't want to do that. I know my mother was terrified of them, and she used to try and absolutely discourage me from it. We got to go on a school camp when I was about 10 years old, and part of that was we got to go to a graveyard at night, and I was like, yeah, and my mum was like, no, absolutely not. And I was too young to know that the reason for that was because she'd seen ghosts, and she was like, no, I don't want them anywhere near my child, because she'd seen the worst of them.
Oh.
She'd seen scary ones, and she'd seen ones that terrorized other people. So because of that, she was like, nope, I don't want them coming near my kid. I don't want them following us home. I don't want anything to do with it. And me, I was the exact opposite. I was like, yeah, I want to see the ghosts. So yeah, we clashed on that a lot.
You sound a
growing
lot like
up.
me in that respect.
Oh yeah, yeah. But yeah, I think it's intuition.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely, legit. Yeah.
Very interesting. It fascinates me how many types of ghosts there are and how many ways they can interact with people.
Yeah.
And then how the person they're interacting with will interpret that.
Yeah.
Like for some people, there are those people that are like, was it like, I'm not sure, but I think it was. And this is what, and they'll tell you their story of what happened, right? But then there are other people that are like, absolutely, there is absolutely no way that it wasn't. And it's those people that I'm like, how do you know? And I like the analytical part of me wants to just pick that apart and be like, are you sure about that?
Yeah.
But even though I know that they are there and I've had so many experiences with them, like I'm definitely not a skeptic.
Yeah.
But I'm like, how do you know that it was?
Exactly. And you know what? I think that's a good paranormal investigator right there, because what people don't realize with paranormal investigation, they're like, oh, there's a bunch of ghost freaks that are out there looking for ghosts. And you're like, no, what you have to do in paranormal investigations is rule 101 is to debunk every single thing you come across. So when you go into an investigation, you take notes of everything, and then you immediately try to debunk that. And then if you can manage it, you try to debunk the debunk.
Yeah.
It's so great. So you sit there going, it could have been the wind. It could have been a shadow. It could have been old creaky floorboards. It could be a billion other things. But there are some things that simply don't have explanations. And it's like the Sherlock Holmes things. Whatever remains, however unlikely, a good chance it's the truth. There's something. I also believe in, like if you actually look into things like quantum mechanics and quantum theory, there's also a possibility of it there, because the whole idea is that we haven't seen all that there is out there. There are still worlds out there that we haven't seen, and we might be interacting with them in certain ways, but we just don't know that, because there's no way for us to be able to break the veil on our level
yet.
Exactly. And when you think about it in that sort of term, you're like, yeah, absolutely. This is just an energy exchange of some kind. I absolutely believe that there are other planes out there that we haven't.
I mean, look at our universe. Like, we can only see this much of it.
Exactly.
What else is beyond that? Yeah,
exactly. And there are so many great theories we don't know. That's the thing. It's all theories yet, and even like some of the stronger theories, they're still being played with and, worked through every single day. People trying to disprove them, people trying to prove them. There's no way of knowing. And that's why I love quantum theory, because there's so much in that says, yeah, anything is possible. That's the thing. That's the whole thing of quantum.
I could listen to talks about it for hours, honestly.
1,000,000%, yeah.
It just makes I seem to go down a rabbit hole when I do, though, because my mind just spirals.
Exactly. Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's amazing how those schools of thought, back in the 1800s, back in the early 1900s, we just thought they were freaking crazy. And then, later down the track, a lot of those theories got proven. Like if you'd explained to someone in the 1800s to visualize something, they would have been like, well,
Off
that's
to
a
the loony
crock.
bin.
Exactly. They're like,
and then they would have become
no.
a ghost that we're investigating today.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, 100%. So yeah, I think anything is possible. Yeah. Absolutely anything.
So if you had to, in layman's terms, if you had to explain to somebody what a ghost is, how would you describe that?
I would just describe them as, it's tempting to use the word spirit because, yeah, that's the most easy translatable version that we've got. Like linguistically, that's the word that makes the most sense. I would say it's energy left over from people who have passed. I definitely believe people have essences that stick around. Absolutely. And sometimes it's just a replay of something that's happened. You get ghost loops a lot. You get a lot of echoes. And it's not necessarily that there's a spirit left over. It's that the essence is left over. And it's just replaying this moment over and over again. I think it's a remnant. I've always thought that it's a remnant of some kind, whether it's a full, soul that's chosen to stay for whatever reason, whether there's unfinished business, whether there's echoes. But I like to look at it as the dearly departed. It's people we loved at one point, and somehow they've stuck around in some way, shape, or form, whether it's a wave energy, if you want to look at it in physics terms, whether it's some kind of, remainder of some type of energy. But I always just look at it as these are people who were once loved, and these are people who once loved. And when you look at it that way, I don't know, you have nothing but love and compassion for them.
Yeah, it takes the fear out, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people, they hear the scary ghost stories and like, oh my God, I'd hate for that to happen. It's like,
and
what are they trying to say?
There is that element, yes.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna beautify ghosts and spirits and say they're all lovely, because
some of them aren't.
For safety's sake, I think it's good that people have that fear.
Absolutely, it's healthy.
Sometimes it's warranted.
Yeah, 100%.
But on the flip side, for example, your grandmother or Aunt Shirley who passed 3 weeks ago, and you might feel their energy around. I think that's when it can become a really beautiful thing. And it doesn't have to be all spooky and scary. Oh my God, there's a ghost in my house. But there's also a loved one in your house.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not a bad thing.
Yeah. Having said that, I love what you said just now about, for safety's sake, because there are certain elements you want to protect yourself from.
Yeah, 100%.
Absolutely. There are some, for lack of better terminology, malevolent energies left over. And it's because, think about it, like the people you interact with on a daily basis, they're not all love and light, are they? Like the people we interact with, some of them you're just like, oh, I can't stand people. And why is that? Because some of them can be real douchebags. Some of them are psychos. Some of them are, exactly. And I know for my mother, I don't think she's ever had one positive experience. I could tell you a great ghost story that she told me, and like it scared the crap out of her, which kind of led to her shutting right down when it came to anything supernatural. But I would say that, most of the time it's just that energy exchange. I think if you do have a natural healthy fear of it, go for it. You don't have to interact with it. No one's forcing you to do it. If you want to be like, it's not my thing, that's cool too. I think that's
it. Respect you.
Yeah. But most of the time, I think my genuine thing is, what are they trying to say? Yeah, like even with the scary ones, even the one that the lady in black, I'm going to call her, what she was trying to say was back off. And I did. She didn't feel respected, so I respected her. She wanted this to stop, so I stopped. And that was the end of it, Animals do it all the time. People do it all the time. They're telling us in different ways that what they need from us. So yeah, it was just a matter of listening.
You really have a lovely way of explaining things, Sandy. I've got to say, and the way you explained what a spirit is exactly the way I see it as well.
Yeah.
It's that remainder of energy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been very interesting chatting to you today.
Oh, thank you.
So, well, before we wrap up, what's coming up next for Sandy?
Oh, that's a good question. I've been so busy. I've just wrapped a film, and right now I'm just taking a break to catch my breath. So yeah, after that, maybe some projects in the pipeline if I'm not too exhausted to do them. But yeah, at this stage, that's pretty much it. But I've really enjoyed today because I don't normally get a chance to talk about this side of things.
Oh, well, I'm so glad you could.
Yeah, it's very exciting.
It's my favourite topic of conversation too.
Yay!
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, cheers.
Thank you. Hope you enjoyed it.
We'll catch you on the next one. Stay spooky.